Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is July 25th, 2026. We're going to read from Judges chapter 8, and then we're going to read Acts chapter 12. All right, so Judges 8, we're continuing our story of Gideon. We just saw God whittle them down from a substantial fighting force to 300 men to go against this awesome Midianite army, and he routs that army so that nobody can say that they did it. Clearly God is the responsible for this victory. They pursued two kings. The kings ended up in Ephraim. Ephraim captured the kings and killed them, and we're going to pick up the story from there. Because now in Judges 8, the men of Ephraim said to him, "Why have you done this to us by not calling us when you went to fight with the Midianites?" And they reprimanded him sharply. They said, "Well, why didn't you take us when you went to fight them?" So he, Gideon, said to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb, and Zeb, and what was I able to do in comparison with you?" Then their anger toward him subsided. When he said that, he said, "Look, you guys captured the kings, not me." And they say, "Oh yeah, okay." And they're satisfied with that answer. Verse 4, when Gideon came to the Jordan, he and the 300 men who were with him crossed over, exhausted but still in pursuit. Then he said to the men of Succoth, he's still after some more kings, "Please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian." And the leaders of Succoth said, "Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army? You haven't won yet," they're telling him, "so we're not going to help you." So Gideon said, "For this cause, when the Lord has delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars." So he says, "You know what? You should have trusted God, because God's going to give them to me, and then I'm going to come back and punish you for not helping me." Verse 8, then he went up from there to Penuel and spoke to them in the same way, and the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. So he also spoke to the men of Penuel, saying, "When I come back in peace, I will tear down this tower." Now Zebah and Zalmunna were at Karkor, and their armies with them, about 15,000 against 300 that Gideon leads. All who were left of all the army of the people of the east, for 120,000 men who drew the sword, had fallen. Then Gideon went up the road of those who dwell in tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and he attacked the army while the camp felt secure. When Zebah and Zalmunna fled, he pursued them, and he took the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and routed the whole army. Then Gideon the son of Joash returned from battle from the ascent of Heres, and he caught a young man of the men of Succoth and interrogated him. And he wrote down for him all the leaders of Succoth and its elders, 77 men. So these are all the ones that said, "Let's not help him." Then he came to the men of Succoth and said, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you ridiculed me, saying, 'Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your weary men?'" And he took the elders of the city and thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. So he dragged them over these briars. Then he tore down the tower of Penuel, and he killed the men of the city. So he makes good on his threat. And he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, "What kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor?" So they answered, "As you are, so were they. Each one resembled the son of a king." Then he said, "They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had let them live, I would not kill you." And he said to Jether his firstborn, "Rise, kill them." But the youth would not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a youth. So he wanted his son to have that honor of killing the enemies, but the son wouldn't do it. Verse 21, so Zebah and Zalmunna said, "Rise yourself and kill us, for as a man is, so is his strength." So Gideon arose, and he killed Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescent ornaments that were on their camels' necks. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, both you and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian." So they want to make him their king. Verse 23, but Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you." So he said, no, that's not how it's going to be. We don't have a king, we have a God. Then Gideon said to them, I would like to make a request of you that each of you would give me the earrings from his plunder, for they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. So they answered, we will gladly give them. And they spread out a garment, and each man threw into it the earring from his plunder. Now the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments, pendants, and purple robes which were on the kings of Midian, and besides the chains that were around their camels' necks. Then Gideon made it into an ephod and set it up in his city, Ophrah, and all Israel played the harlot with it there. It became a snare to Gideon and to his house. Ephod is a holy instrument, so maybe Gideon did it to worship God, to remember what God did for them, but it becomes an object of worship in itself. So it went the wrong way. Should he have done it? Probably not. But he's going to do a few other things too, as we see. Verse 28, thus Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted their heads no more, and the country was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon. Then Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. Gideon had 70 sons who were his own offspring, for he had many wives, and his concubine, who was in Shishim, also bore him a son, whose name he called Abimelech. So even though he turned down being their king, he's living like a king with his own ephod. So he's starting to become what he didn't want to be. Now Gideon the son of Joash died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Bizerites. So it was, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel again played the harlot with the Baals, and made Baal-bereth their god. Thus the children of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side, nor did they show kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, Gideon, in accordance with the good he had done for Israel. So Gideon, again, we started with that reluctant warrior. God gave him some confidence. He rightfully decided he wasn't going to be the king, but then he ended up essentially being the king. And we see that arc. God's people are obedient, then they have some success, and they start to go down in disobedience, and then God punishes them, they turn back to God, but it's descending. And that's where we're going to see here, because our story is going to continue with Abimelech, Gideon's son. So we're not quite done with that story. We're going to get more of it tomorrow. And we're going to see, well, first of all, we saw that Gideon again turned down the kingship, but then he wanted to live like the king anyway. We saw that 40 years while he was alive, they remembered God, but as soon as he dies, they drop back down again, and we're going to see how that plays out tomorrow. But now we're going to move to Acts chapter 12. We've now got that in yesterday's reading. I said, now we've seen the church in its triumphant glory, fully formed. Jews, Samaritans, Gentiles, people are flocking to them. They're preaching the word. They're taking care of people. Great success. What could possibly go wrong? Well, let's look at Acts 12. Now, about that time, Herod the king stretched out his hand to harass some from the church. Herod was an Edomite. He was from Esau's tribe. Ishmaelite, if you will. Not a Jew. He wasn't a Roman either, but he kind of went back and forth between trying to appease the Romans, and then he would anger them and they would turn against him, so he would start to appease the Jews, and then they would get angry at him and he would swing back and forth. That's so this event we're getting ready to see is essentially him trying to say favor with the Romans, trying to get in favor with the Jews by doing something that the Jews couldn't do, which was kill some of these Christians off. And that's what we're going to see here in verse 2. Then he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. So he decides to capture the apostle James and kill him. Why? And because he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to seize Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. So when he had arrested him, he put him in prison, and he delivered him to 4 squads of soldiers to keep him, intending to bring him before the people after Passover. So he kills James. The Jews say, hey, thank you, that was pretty good. So then he says, well, hey, let me go out after Peter. So he's going to start going after the leaders. Not necessarily because he's opposed to Christianity or he loves what the Jewish people are doing. It's just a plot for Herod to find favor with these people. Probably because he's on the outs with the Romans at that time. Verse 5, Peter was therefore kept in prison, but constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church. And when Herod was about to bring him out, that night Peter was sleeping, bound with 2 chains between 2 soldiers, and the guards before the door were keeping the prison. Now behold, an angel of the Lord stood by him, and a light shone in the prison, and he struck Peter on the side, and he raised him up, saying, Arise quickly. And his chains fell off his hands. Then the angel said to him, Gird yourself and tie on your sandals. And so he did. And he said to him, Put on your garment and follow me. So he went out and he followed him, and did not know that what was done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. So he didn't think this is a real event that's actually happening to him. But when they were past the first and the second guard posts, they came to the iron gate that leads to the city, which opened to them of its own accord. And they went out and went down one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. And when Peter had come to himself, he said, Now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel, and has delivered me from the hand of Herod and from all the expectation of the Jewish people. So when he thinks it's a vision, but when it stops, he realizes, hey, I'm not in prison anymore. It was real. So when he had considered this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, the same Mark that wrote the Gospel of Mark, the same Mark that we're going to see later in Acts accompany Paul and Barnabas. His mother was Mary, who owns a big house. Now, probably could have possibly had the big room that they meet in. So even though Mark is not officially a disciple of Jesus during his life, he probably encountered him several times and overheard some things. In fact, in Mark's gospel, he says he followed him out to the garden, and that he's the one that flees away, leaving his tunic behind. He's also, we're going to see later in, I believe, 1 Corinthians, that he's the cousin, that Barnabas is his uncle, Barnabas is his uncle. So there's a relationship there, and that's why Barnabas wanted him to accompany him and Paul. So let's go back to 12. So when he had considered this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a girl named Rhoda came to answer. When she recognized Peter's voice, because of her gladness, she did not open the gate. So she's so happy she couldn't do anything. She just runs in and announced that Peter stood before the gate. But they said to her, You are beside yourself. And she kept insisting that it was so. So they said, It is his angel. Now, first century Jews believed, some of them believed in guardian angels that could look like me. My guardian angel would look like me. So some of them are saying, well, that's what that is. It's his guardian angel. The Bible doesn't really tell us anything about guardian angels definitively, but we do see kind of that mythological thing creep in now and then. So we don't want to use this as a proof that we all have a guardian angel. But they were praying for him to be saved, and it's interesting that they don't rejoice that he's there and their prayers have been answered. They think, no. Probably because James just got killed. So it's like, hey, let's not get our hopes up again, because that really hurt us. Let's not get our hopes up that Peter's really out there. Verse 16, Now Peter continued knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. But motioning to them with his hand to keep silent, he declared to them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. And he said, Go tell these things to James and to the brethren. Now this James is the brother of Jesus, James. And he ends up becoming the leader of the church in Jerusalem. So he's not an apostle. That apostle James has died. This is the brother of Jesus, who last time we saw him was disbelieving that Jesus was really the Messiah, or was afraid of what Jesus was saying, and he was kind of reluctant. But apparently somewhere in the resurrection, he has been converted, and he becomes a very strong leader of the Christian church. So Peter says, go tell him, go tell the rest of the apostles. And then Peter departs and he went to another place. And we're going to see Peter disappear from Acts for a while. We're going to get a little brief mention of him in about chapter 15, but that's it. Now we're going to move to Paul's story for the rest of Acts. 18, then as soon as it was day, there was no small stir among the soldiers about what had become of Peter. So the morning comes, but when Herod had searched for him and not found him, he examined the guards and commanded that they should be put to death. So he's not anywhere in the prison. And he went down from Judea to Caesarea, and he stayed there. That's Herod. The Roman soldiers are punished by receiving the punishment that Peter was going to get. That's standard Roman practice. So Herod had every intention of killing Peter. Herod now goes to Caesarea. Verse 20, now Herod had been very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, but they came to him with one accord. So this is a different group of people that he's angry with, and he, having made Blastus, the king's personal aide, their friend, they asked for peace because their country was supplied with food by the king's country. So he's holding court with people who want things from him. So on a set day, Herod, arrayed in royal apparel, and Josephus, the Roman historian, tells us it was a silver suit that he wore. So he was sparkling in the sun, sat on his throne and gave an oration to them. And the people kept shouting, the voice of a God and not a man. Tried to butter him up. But Herod doesn't say, no, I'm just a man. Just like we see everywhere else in our scripture when you're trying to worship someone that's not God. He says, nope. Herod says, oh gosh, my people, they love me so much. Verse 23, then immediately an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give glory to God. And he was eaten by worms and died. And Josephus again tells us it was a 5-day death in agony. So his guts essentially burst inside of him. But the word of God grew and multiplied. And Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their ministry, and they also took with them John, whose surname was Mark. May God bless the reading of his word, and may God bless you.